August 12, 1942. Motor Torpedo Boat Station, Tulagi Harbor, Solomon Islands. The radioman copied the urgent transmission from Henderson Field. A Japanese destroyer group had been spotted moving southeast through the slot. Multiple ships were reported, expected to reach Iron Bottom Sound by 0200 hours. Lieutenant Hugh Robinson, among the earliest PT boat officers to arrive in the Solomons, examined the intelligence summary. For small craft against an uncertain number of Japanese destroyers, warships that had ruled these waters since the conflict began. None of them yet realized that these 77-foot wooden boats were about to launch a campaign of nocturnal interference that would force the Imperial Japanese Navy to dramatically revise its supply methods in the Solomons. Japan controlled the night seas around Guadalcanal. Since the American landings in August 1942, Japanese destroyers had been running supplies and reinforcements down the slot, the narrow corridor through the central Solomons, with virtually no opposition. American forces dubbed these supply missions the Tokyo Express, and they had become the artery sustaining Japanese troops on Guadalcanal. The Imperial Navy's dominance in night engagements had been proven devastatingly at Savo Island in August, where Japanese cruisers sank 4 Allied heavy cruisers in barely half an hour. Their Type 93 long-lance torpedoes could hit targets at 20,000 yards. Their sailors had spent years perfecting night fighting strategies. Their optical gear and skilled lookouts could detect opponents in near-complete darkness where American radar often struggled. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's philosophy was simple: command the night, command the supply routes, preserve the garrison. The Americans might hold daylight superiority thanks to aircraft from Henderson Field, but the darkness favored Japan. Without these nightly supply deliveries, the 30,000 Japanese soldiers on Guadalcanal would be starving within weeks. The PT boat embodied American mechanical ingenuity pushed to real-world extremes. Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 2 had reached Tulagi with the first craft in August 1942. Each Elco 77-footer displaced only 45 tons, 77 feet long, 20-foot beam, 5-foot draft, shallow enough to maneuver where destroyers could not follow. Lieutenant Roland Westholm commanded one of the early boats, reviewing his craft's weapons as daylight faded. 2 twin .50 caliber gun mounts, 4 21-inch torpedo tubes loaded with Mark 8 torpedoes, munitions plagued by a 50% dud rate caused by faulty magnetic exploders and depth-keeping issues. The boats initially carried no radar, depending solely on eyesight and sound. But their real advantage was speed. 3 Packard 4M 2500 12-cylinder engines, each producing 1,350 horsepower. Top speed was 41 knots in flat water, though 35 was more realistic under combat conditions. Japanese destroyers could manage roughly 35 knots at maximum. In the tight waterways around Guadalcanal, speed equaled survival. Their construction broke from traditional naval methods. 2 layers of mahogany planking created a flexible hull capable of absorbing hits that would fracture steel. A PT boat could be built in 2 months for $263,000, while a destroyer took 18 months and cost $8 million. Motor machinists made first-class Eldon Genta had spent 8 months mastering the countless sounds the Packard engines could produce. A Detroit mechanic who had worked on the Packard assembly lines before enlisting, Genta could identify engine issues by sound alone in pitch darkness. "These engines are temperamental," Genta told new arrivals. "Wrong fuel mixture and you lose 200 horsepower. Let them run hot and you'll throw a rod. But treat them right and they'll give you the speed when it counts." Genta adjusted the carburetor settings to match Solomon Islands' humidity. He devised a pre-combat routine that included warming engines to exact temperatures, tuning ignition timing for peak acceleration, and verifying that cooling systems could endure sustained high-speed runs. His modifications kept the boats functioning long after factory guidelines claimed they shouldn't. Commander Koshi Kaneda stood on the bridge of a Fubuki-class destroyer, guiding 3 destroyers down the slot at 28 knots. 2 decades in the Imperial Navy had taught him how to read these waters. Any shadow could conceal an attacker. Any faint glow might indicate a torpedo trail. Tonight's assignment: deliver 800 drums of supplies to the garrison at Cape Esperance. The drums would be pushed overboard near the beach, where soldiers would swim out to retrieve them. It was inefficient. Only 30% of supplies typically made it ashore, but it was safer than attempting conventional unloading under threat of air attack at dawn. The destroyer's main vulnerability was its size and inflexibility. At 388 feet long, the destroyer needed 800 yd to complete a full turn at speed. Her draft of 12 feet limited her to deep water channels. Her 5 inches guns couldn't depress low enough to engage targets closer than 300 yards. Against small, fast targets at close range, the destroyer's advantages evaporated. October 13, 1942, 2,330 hours. 4 pt. Boats from Squadron 2 idled in the shadows of Savo Island. Engines muffled, running at minimum RPM to reduce noise and phosphorescent wake. No radio communication, only hand signals and shielded blinker lights. Lieutenant Lester Gamble in PT-48 led the patrol line. The boats spread out at 500 y intervals, watching and listening. Without radar, they relied on what sailors called the Mark I eyeball. Human vision adapted to darkness after hours. Without artificial light. At 2,347, lookout spotted shadows against the horizon. 3 destroyers in column formation, making 25 knots toward Cape Esperon. The standard PT boat attack doctrine called for approaching from different angles to split enemy defensive fire. But with only 4 boats and unreliable torpedoes, Gamble chose concentration. All boats would attack from the destroyer's starboard quarter, fire torpedoes at 500 yards, then scatter at maximum speed. PT-48 led the approach, engines throttled to 1,500 revolutions per minute until reaching 1,000 yards. Then Gamble pushed the throttles forward. The boat leaped to 35 knots, closing rapidly on the last destroyer in line. At 500 yards, Gamble fired 2 torpedoes, angling them to lead the target by 30 degrees. The Mark 8 torpedoes left visible wakes of bubbles, immediately alerting Japanese lookouts. Gorai, Gorai. Torpedoes. The destroyer's helmsman threw the wheel hard left. Both torpedoes passed a stern, missing by less than 20 yards. Star shells burst overhead, illuminating the PT boats in harsh white light. 5 inches. Guns opened fire, fontaining water around PT-48 as Gamble zigzagged violently at full throttle. PT-46 attacked next, closing to 400 yards. Before firing, 1 torpedo ran erratically and missed. The second suffered detonator failure, bouncing off the destroyer's hull without exploding. A problem that would plague PT boats throughout the war. The boats claimed possible hits, but Japanese records show all destroyers returned safely. However, the attacks forced the destroyers to jettison supplies prematurely with minimal amounts reaching shore. The first indication that PT boats could disrupt supply operations even without sinking ships. The disruption of October 13th convinced Admiral William Halsey to reinforce PT operations. By November 1942, 12 points boats operated from Tulagi. Additional boats arrived with new tactics developed through hard experience. Intelligence revealed the Tokyo Express schedule runs every 3 to 5 nights, weather permitting. 4-2. 8 destroyers per run. Route. Predictable. Down the slot around Savo Island to various beaches on Guadalcanal's north coast. Lieutenant Commander Thomas G. Warfield developed new tactical doctrine based on early encounters. PT boats would operate in sections of 3. One boat would fire torpedoes while the others created diversions with gunfire. When torpedoes missed, which happened at least 50% of the time, the guns would force destroyers to take evasive action, disrupting their supply drops. Following the surface action, where American cruisers were defeated by Japanese destroyers, PT boats became one element in the broader interdiction effort. While they couldn't match the firepower of destroyers, their harassment tactics forced changes in Japanese operations. PT boats patrolled the approaches to Cape Esperance, attacking supply destroyers when possible. Though most torpedo attacks failed, the constant threat forced Japanese commanders to maintain high-speed, zigzag continuously, and jettison supplies hastily, reducing delivery efficiency to under 20%. 11 Japanese destroyers approached Guadalcanal in the largest supply run to date. PT boats sorted to intercept but achieved limited success. The boats fired over 30 torpedoes without confirmed hits, illustrating the weapon's reliability problems. However, the psychological impact was significant. Japanese reports noted enemy motor torpedo boats make operations extremely hazardous. Must maintain constant evasive action. PT-59 achieved one of the few confirmed kills, sinking Japanese submarine the 3 as it attempted to deliver supplies. This demonstrated PT boats could be effective against slower, less maneuverable targets. Admiral Riso Tanaka, Japan's most skilled destroyer commander, personally led the next supply run. His flagship, the new Akatsuki-class destroyer Terazuki, equipped with the latest fire control systems and rapid-fire guns. 10 additional destroyers accompanied him, 6 carrying supplies in drums. At 2,315, PT boats from Squadron 2 detected the Japanese formation of Cape Esperance. Tanaka had anticipated PT boat attacks, stationing Terazuki as rear guard while supply destroyers moved inshore. PT-37 under Lieutenant Lester Gamble, PT-40 under Lieutenant John Sears and PT-48 coordinated their approach. This was the tactic they had refined over 2 months of combat. Divide enemy attention, create confusion, exploit opportunities. At 2,323, one or more PT boats, historical accounts vary between PT-37, PT-40, or PT-48, fired torpedoes at Terazuki from approximately 500 yards. At least one Mark 8 torpedo struck Terazuki's port quarter, detonating against the steering compartment. The explosion damaged Terazuki's rudder and propeller shaft, reducing speed to 12 knots. Oil from ruptured fuel tanks caught fire, illuminating the destroyer for miles. Admiral Tanaka was injured in the explosion and temporarily relieved of command for medical treatment. Destroyer Naganami came alongside to evacuate Admiral Tanaka and wounded crew members. The rescue operation took 30 minutes. during which the entire Japanese formation milled in confusion. Supply destroyers jettisoned their drums prematurely. At 0440 on December 12, Terazuki's depth charges detonated from the heat of fires, breaking the destroyer's back. She sank in 800 feet of water, becoming the largest Japanese warship definitively sunk by PT boats during World War II. The sinking of Terazuki marked the peak of PTO anti-destroyer operations. Though PT boats would not sink another Japanese destroyer, their cumulative impact as one element of the broader interdiction campaign was significant. Japanese records revealed the extent of disruption. Motor torpedo boats combined with air attacks and surface forces make night supply operations increasingly untenable. Delivery efficiency reduced below sustainable levels. Admiral Tanaka, after recovering from his injuries, continued to command, but noted the enemy's motor torpedo boats, while rarely achieving hits, force constant evasive action that severely degrades our supply delivery capability. By January 1943, the Tokyo Express shifted to submarine and barge operations, methods even less efficient than destroyer runs. The combination of PT boat harassment, airstrikes, and surface actions had made destroyer operations unsustainable. The PTBO campaign demonstrated that naval warfare had entered a new paradigm, where multiple weapon systems working together could neutralize traditional advantages. PT boats alone rarely sank major warships, but as part of a combined arms approach, they contributed to strategic victory. Production statistics revealed the industrial equation. The United States built 531 points boats during World War II. Each boat required 2 months to build and cost 30 th of a destroyer. Even with high loss rates, 69 boats lost from all causes, they provided cost-effective harassment capability. Training programs at the Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron's Training Center in Melville, Rhode Island, produced over 1,000 officers and 10,000 enlisted men. Each crew required just 8 weeks of training before deployment. By mid-1943, PT boats received SO radar sets allowing detection at 15 miles. The improved Mark 13 torpedo introduced in late 1943 increased reliability significantly. These upgrades turned PT boats into more capable combat units, though their main function remained the harassment and disruption of smaller enemy craft. The Imperial Navy tried several countermeasures with limited effect. Destroyer escorts swept ahead of supply groups, but this split their formations. Floatplanes released flares to expose PT boats, but the light also betrayed the destroyer's own locations. The transition to submarine resupply runs proved inadequate. Submarines could haul only 20 tons of cargo compared to roughly 200 tons for destroyers. The garrison needed 400 tons per day. Logistical defeat was unavoidable. The creation of armored supply barges for coastal movements represented an adaptation to the PT boat threat. These slow craft became the primary quarry for PT boats from 1943 onward, where the boats achieved their most notable results against enemy logistics. PT boat duty attracted volunteers seeking combat. Average age, 22. Many had never set foot on a ship before. Training. They learned navigation, engineering, and combat through intensive instruction and harsh experience. Living conditions were austere. No toilets, crews used buckets. No kitchens, cold rations only. No real bunks, men slept on deck whenever possible. Tropical illnesses struck 80% of personnel. Battle stress was extreme, with all hands exposed during action. Casualty rates reached 33%, higher than any other naval branch. Yet morale remained strong. PT sailors understood. They were select volunteers taking extraordinary risks. They formed tight bonds that cut across rank. Lieutenant John F. Kennedy's PT 109 showed both the peril and heroism of PT operations. On August 2, 1943, PT 109 collided with the destroyer Amagiri during a chaotic night engagement. Kennedy's actions in leading his survivors to safety became legendary, though the episode underscored how dangerously exposed PT boats were. Against destroyers, the collision was not a deliberate ramming, it happened in the darkness when neither ship detected the other in time. 11 of 13 crewmen survived, with Kennedy towing a wounded sailor for hours to reach safety. The PT boat campaign reshaped understanding of literal warfare and asymmetric naval tactics. Although PT boats sank relatively few large warships, one destroyer, one submarine, and many barges, their harassing value far exceeded their direct sinkings. Post-war studies showed the PT forces' main contribution was forcing Japanese commanders to adopt increasingly inefficient supply systems. The shift from destroyers to submarines to barges represented a tactical victory through the gradual erosion of logistical capacity. Modern fast attack craft are descendants of the PT concept, small, fast vessels using speed and surprise to challenge larger ships. The weapons shifted from torpedoes to guided missiles, but the core principle remained the same. In the waters around Guadalcanal, 77-foot wooden craft demonstrated that coordinated naval operations could counter traditional superiority. PT boats alone could not stop the Tokyo Express, but combined with air power, submarines, and surface ships, they contributed to the gradual attrition that proved decisive. The Japanese Navy entered the war confident in its mastery of night combat. They had not foreseen that American forces would use multiple interlocking systems, each individually vulnerable but overwhelming in combination. Commander Tamikihara, who survived several PT boat encounters, wrote, "The PT boats taught us that modern war demands adaptation to unusual threats. They seldom struck us, but they never let us rest." The final record was strategically important despite modest tactical gains. One destroyer confirmed sunk Terazuki. One submarine I-3. Hundreds of supply missions disrupted. Thousands of tons of cargo lost in hastily abandoned drums. The cumulative effect helped bring about Japan's defeat at Guadalcanal. In Iron Bottom Sound, where so many ships rest on the seafloor, Terazuki lies in 800 feet of water, the only major Japanese warship conclusively sunk by PT boats. Her wreck, located in 2024, stands as a memorial to The young men who fought in small wooden craft against steel destroyers, proving that determination and persistence could shape strategic outcomes even when tactical successes were few. The Mosquito boats demonstrated that future naval warfare would require cooperative operations, technological adaptation, and recognition that even small combatants could contribute to strategic victory when used within broader campaigns.